Mrs. Flood has now appeared in as many episodes of Doctor Who Season 2 as Doctor Who Season 1, if we count the church on Ruby Road. She's gone from being the neighbour of the 15th Doctor's first companion, Ruby, to the neighbour of his second, Belinda, and has subsequently been stalking the Doctor and Belinda across space and time from 1950s Miami to the planet 6767/Midnight in the far future. And now she's taken a brief detour in the Dr. Light Lucky Day to rescue new villain Conrad Clark from prison. I've been covering every step of the Mrs. Flood mystery so far, week by week, in previous videos, so be sure to go and check those out if you want in-depth analysis of the scenes we've had in the Robot Revolution, Lux and The Well. But yes, this week we got Mrs. Flood as the prison governor, which was very fun indeed. You know, as with the previous couple of episodes, she cropped up at the end of the story after the main action had wrapped up to deliver a nice little tease to the audience, and in particular this time, quite a significant development where she was encountering and freeing from prison this new villain Conrad, who we'd met, across the course of the story. It looked like his own story was done, he'd been taken down, put in prison, and been told by the Doctor just before that he was going to stay in prison until his death at the age of 49. Conrad had told the Doctor in response that he doesn't accept that reality, doesn't accept the Doctor's reality. It was a kind of ominous, sort of threatening moment there, but we didn't see any way that Conrad would be able to escape this fate in that moment. It seemed like his fate was sealed. Until then, Mrs. Flood cropped up with the keys, let him out, and who knows what's happening there. Clearly she's going to be teaming up with Conrad, kind of taking him under her wing, taking advantage of this disaffected young man who is already a very despicable, horrible person in his own rights, but now has history with the Doctor as well, and a personal vendetta against the Doctor, and a reason to get back at him, which I think, if you were a villain going around recruiting people to help your cause, would be a very useful thing to have on your side. So there are a number of things to discuss here. I think first of all, to go back to last week, The Well, where we saw Mrs. Flood interacting with the surviving crew members of that mission to Midnight, to go and see what was going on down there in The Well, in this abandoned mining base. Last week I speculated that Mrs. Flood could be the boss, as in the boss mentioned by the Meep and possibly Rogue as well in previous episodes, and this appearance would also fit with that theory, I think. If she's this big kind of criminal mastermind or whatever, or just head honcho, and she's going around, recruiting people, she's very much recruiting Conrad here, teaming up with him, so I think that would certainly make sense for her to be the boss and for Conrad to be one of her associates. This is also interesting from another point of view because Russell T Davies, the showrunner of Doctor Who, has previously mentioned in the Radio Times preview for this season, in particular for the finale, that episode 8 will see the Doctor go up against the Unholy Trinity. A very ominous tease there. Who knows what that means, but clearly it implies there are going to be 3 people or 3 entities, 3 forces involved. So I think it would be, a very safe bet, even before this story aired, to say that Mrs. Flood is one of those 3 people. But now, having seen the developments on Lucky Day as well, it would seem that Conrad could also be part of this Unholy Trinity, the second player, the second person. But then who could be the third person in the Trinity? The possibilities there are endless. I won't say here, obviously, because I try and keep these videos relatively spoiler-free. I like to speculate, but not go into spoilers, if I can. But if you have read the big potential leak, about the finale of this season, then, there would be a kind of obvious contender for who that third person might be. That aside, I think if Mrs. Flood doesn't end up being a returning villain from the show's past, which personally I think is unlikely, but if that doesn't end up being the case, maybe the third person in the Trinity is the returning villain. So maybe it's not her, maybe it's someone else, and that kind of completes this trio. Or hey, maybe there are 2 returning villains involved, Mrs. Flood and somebody else. Maybe it's a more recent character, from this era even. We've seen other members of the Pantheon so far, the members of Mrs. Flood's kind of gang, if she is indeed the boss, the Meep and other people like that. Could there be some kind of shock twist where, like, one of the Doctor's companions ends up being part of the Trinity, maybe unaware of their powers or what they are, maybe like Belinda being undercover or Ruby or something? I'm not quite sure I like that theory myself, but it has been suggested, that one of them could go rogue. But the second point I'd like to turn to now is the idea that Mrs. Flood is a Time Lord, which I've addressed in the past, and I think by this point that seems pretty likely. We've seen her move around time and space over the past few weeks, and actually when I was watching that Conrad scene at the end play out, where he meets the Doctor and has that kind of encounter with him, and we hear the TARDIS sound in the background, obviously we hadn't seen Mrs. Flood by that point in the episode, and I did wonder for a split second, oh my god, is this a different TARDIS? Not the Doctor's TARDIS, but Mrs. Flood's TARDIS. Is this moment going to reveal that she is indeed a Time Lord, as we've been speculating? Alas, no, we're still on the wiser there. But there is something else interesting that people have picked up on, which is the fact that obviously Mrs. Flood is a prison governor here, and she is not the first prison governor we've seen in Doctor Who. I suppose even dating back to stories like The Mind of Evil, that was set in a prison. But the example that people have noticed is relatively more recent. It is, of course, The End of Time, when there's a prison governor in that story who helps to resurrect the John Sim Harold Saxon Master, and it's revealed that the hand that picked up the Master's ring in The Last of the Time Lords was that of this prison governor character, this member of a cult of Saxon or whatever it's called, who are devoted to bringing him back to life. And of course, more recently, we've seen another hand pick up an object containing the Master's life essence in the Giggle, in the Toymaker's gold tooth, and that has also kind of widely been speculated to be the hand of Mrs. Flood. So that could just be a coincidence, but it could also be a sly nod to the fact that, we are once again about to see the Master resurrected by a prison governor, that Mrs. Flood is one of his acolytes or whatever, or if other rumours are true and she's a different Time Lord or character like the Rani, say, perhaps, the Rani picked up the Master's tooth and, she's keeping it safe or is about to resurrect him as part of one of her experiments. That would be quite fun to see, especially since the Master and the Rani have previously appeared together, in The Mark of the Rani's first story. I did also see someone point out that I think in the Big Finish audio drama, the Rani has previously disguised herself as a prison governor, and if you go on the TARDIS wiki page for the Rani, that comes up as one of her aliases or disguises or whatever. So again, that's probably just a coincidence if Mrs. Flood is indeed the Rani. But it's interesting that these things are here and kind of stacking up, adding up, and resonating with each other, and it just makes for a very intriguing discussion surrounding this character. It would certainly be very, very cool if it was building to that particular scenario and that particular outcome, but I guess we'll have to just wait and see. But yes, what do you think of Mrs. Flood's latest cameo, this latest development in her story, which has seen her seemingly team up with Conrad Clark? What do you think she's plotting? What do you think the pair of them are going to get up to later in the season? It's all very intriguing. Let me know all of your thoughts and theories in the comments below. Please do leave a like if you enjoyed this video, and subscribe to the channel if you're new. We're really close to 9,000 subscribers at the moment, so let's make that happen. But otherwise, until the next one, thank you so much for watching, and goodbye for now.